AM 560 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when you're moving out. I said, when
Top of the morning, Dan
out.
and Amy. So yesterday, we were talking about House Bill 3751, one of the pieces of legislation sent to Governor Jellybelly's desk for signature that would allow non-citizens with a valid work permit under federal law to serve as police officers. This was supported by House Republicans for the most part. It was opposed by Senate Republicans for the most part. Here, an example of the opposition, Chapin Rose, here, state senator from Champaign area, on the Senate floor during debate on the issue.
The most important power that must be conferred with absolute concern for how it is employed and how it can be abused is the power to arrest. We listen every day in this building to debates about the police powers of the state of Illinois. And yet here we are conferring the police power, the ability to arrest a citizen of the state of Illinois, or frankly, a visitor to Illinois from anywhere else in the United States of America, an American citizen, to a non-citizen. This is just a foundational thing. I get that everybody's running away from law enforcement in Chicago because of everything the state of Illinois has done to law enforcement in the city of Chicago. But to backfill that and hand the power to arrest and detain a citizen of this state or citizen of any state in the United States to a non-citizen is a fundamental breach of democracy. It is antithetical to the police power of any state. And at the end of the day, quite frankly, it's antithetical to everything that I hear from the other side of the aisle every day in this building. This is a fundamentally bad idea. There's no fixing it, there's no amending it, there's no nothing. It's just a fundamentally bad idea. I don't care where this individual is from. Australia, they should not be able to arrest a United States citizen on United States soil.
I agree. It's a fundamentally bad idea. So I got a call from John Cabello, who's a state rep from Rockford and a former cop, owning up to his culpability for it. So, I mean, it's good that he owned up to it. Said, look, Barbara Hernandez, who's the sponsor of this legislation, and one of the Che Guevara members of the Latino caucus, came to me and said, how can I get Republican votes on this? I said, well, you can't. And he said, well, what if what if we put a language change in there about federal law? Because it's if you don't say if federal law changes to provide for this, then if you passed it, it would be a violation of federal law, and you could litigate it. So Barbara Hernandez agreed. Said they put in the rider to make this really ceremonial legislation because federal law doesn't provide for this at this point and probably never will. But And so he says, so I said I would if she made the language change, and so she did, and then I supported it, and I got colleagues to support it. And I said to John, I said, John, I appreciate you giving me the backstory. I understand what you're saying, but this is fundamentally the problem. Fundamentally the problem with the Republican Party in this state. Why are you trying to improve their terrible ideas? Barbara, you have the votes. You guys want to ram this through, even though it's in violation of federal law. Go ahead. Vote your shares. And then we'll take up the issue. This is what Chicago Democrats and their roll call votes around the state do. This is what they think is a good idea. Giving police power to non-citizens to police citizens. That's what you should do. Then you have daylight between you and the Democrat Party, which is what you want, which is what you need, so people understand the difference. And so I like John, and I appreciate he was a stand-up guy enough to say, I see your point, and I made a mistake, but I made a promise to support it if she made the language change, and so I was stuck, and I did what I did. Fine. Okay, you made a mistake. Fine. People make mistakes. It's not even, it's just so illustrative of the problem, the failed thinking, politically as well as from a policy perspective of the Republican Party in the state. You want to know why they're in the super minority despite this being the worst governed state in American history? It's because of instances like that. There's just no thought and there's no leadership. There's nobody saying, well, wait a second. This is an opportunity to distinguish ourselves. This is an opportunity to improve our brand, to have a brand. No, let's do the best we can to make their terrible ideas modestly less terrible. Let's throw in with them 101 stuff. Oh, and by the way, before the Senate Republicans get too full of themselves for opposing this on principled grounds, like Chapin Rose just said, those same Republicans in the Senate then turned around and voted for Senate Bill 1298, the Medicaid bill, which is, exponentially more of your money than was projected. Of course it is, to provide health care for people in this state and in this country illegally in this state. So on the one hand, we're against a ceremonial legislation that would theoretically confer police power to non-citizens to police citizens, but then we're going to turn around and we're going to vote to spend your money to provide unlimited health care to migrants in Illinois. Again, a missed opportunity. Well, let's make their terrible omnibus Medicaid bill a little better because we don't want to be seen as not supporting rate hikes for health centers and CHIP programs and so on and so forth. Full-time nurses. Oh, we can't do that. Yeah, you can. Vote your shares. You're the supermajority. And we're going to stand here and tell the people what you're doing and why this is bad and how it could be done better so that the people in this state understand the difference between the two parties. They don't understand the difference between the two parties right now because there isn't any. Just astounding. It's so basic. For more on all this, pleased to be joined by Ted Dabrowski, President Wirepoints, wirepoints.org. Ted, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
You were on the Medicaid expansion that was advanced by Pritzker, and we talked to you about this a couple of weeks ago before the end of session and the latest phony baloney budget, what they projected the Medicaid spending to be with the expansion to non-citizens and what it actually is. What are those numbers again?
Yeah, so, if you go back to the beginning a few years ago, they were predicting, $2 million. I'm trying to think of the Congresswoman now, former state rep.
Yeah.
Anyway, $2
Dahlia
million.
Ramirez.
And then it pops up to $100 million, then $500 million. Now it's $1.1 billion. the real problem we have with those projections is that, Pritzker, nobody knows how many illegal immigrants are coming into Illinois. Right? We're only talking about, a lot of times we talk about the numbers we know, the people being bused. But what about all the people who are, coming through the borders? They know Illinois and Chicago is a sanctuary city and state, and so they're just coming right in. We don't know. That number could just jump.
But what we do know is the projection was 2 million and it's $1 billion.
Exactly.
I
mean, how do you
come on?
Right, and then what we know is that they only, in the end, they negotiated. They appropriated only $550 million because Pritzker is going to use rules in some way to lower that amount. Well, good luck trying to figure that one out.
What about this? Oh, sorry, go on, Ted.
I just think it's going to be a bigger mess and part of the problem we have, like any perpetual financial problem we have here.
Well, speaking of finances, the most recent Illinois budget includes $300,000 grant to Black Lives Matter Lake County. The group's led by a convicted felon and it appears to be defunct. So how does our tax dollars go to that? A group that's
I don't know.
Not even existent.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, well, Clyde McLemore runs the group. He's been up in Lake County doing all kinds of stuff there for a long time. I don't know how that plays out. Right? It's more signaling that they're going to support Black Lives Matter. I can't answer any more than that. It's just typical stuff. And I want to go back.
Defunct organizations get funded just like the dead can vote. And by the way, that's not the first $300,000 grant. That's our second $300,000 grant. Nobody knows what the first $300,000 was used on. And so, but they always come up with money. There's plenty of money for that, and no money to provide scholarships for kids to go to better schools than they are currently otherwise relegated to attend.
Yeah, if anybody understood Illinois, and this is something that it took me a while to figure out, but there's so much money that goes to outside governmental groups. So there are all these not-for-profit groups, right? All kinds of helping groups. They are really just part of the machine, right? The money gets doled out. It gets spent in ways that nobody understands because they don't have the same transparency. There's no true accountability metrics. I remember we worked on this a decade ago, trying to figure out, when all that money is given out in grants by the state, does anybody really know what happens to it? Does anybody hold anything? Are there any accountability measures? And there are none. It's really hard to figure out. So that money just goes out, and then the machine knows how to spend it well.
Speaking of money pits, I love this. If it's a bad idea, it will not go away in Illinois. It will not go away. And we're going to spend a lot of money pursuing it. And we continue to. I'm talking about Piatone. Piatone's in the budget. We're trying to revive Piatone. We don't have an airline that wants to fly there. We never had. But this goes back at least to George Ryan. So this is 25 years of spending money on an airport that the airlines don't want.
Yeah, again, you'll find that kind of stuff all over the budget, and there's some groups, and we did a piece on one that just talks about all the silly laws that are in there. Many of them wasteful, many of them wrong. Piatone. We'll keep talking about that one. Which kind of brings me to an important point. The Atlantic. This is not Wirepoints, but the Atlantic just wrote. And part of the reason we have all these crazy bills is because we have this money flowing around from COVID that still impacting our budgets. The Atlantic just wrote that when the flow of federal money runs out, they highlight California, Illinois, New York City will face enormous budget gaps. And so, it's going to come around again. And I think this lack of control over spending during this COVID period is really going to wake things up for whatever it's worth. Then again, it might wake up another bailout from the federal government. But, I think that the chickens are going to come home and roost. So.
We also see your rundown of some of the lowlights from this recently concluded session of the General Assembly. All the indoctrination continues unabated. School mandate to enforce anti-racism, cultural competency training for medical professionals, gender changes so that it's pregnant person, not pregnant women. Or pregnant woman in the state's child welfare and juvenile court rules, so on and so forth. So all the identitarian indoctrination, they just pressed down on the pedal, didn't they?
Yeah, they do, and they do because they can. Again, it kind of goes back to your point about the Republicans and not putting a good visible opposition. Mark, my colleague, wrote that piece with several, 15 either bad or crazy laws, dumb laws. The problem I had with that is that, the list should be much, much longer. It's really hard for us to figure out what's in in that whole budget bill, but it's certainly longer. What was interesting about your point on the Republicans, Dan, and I remember this when I had a call with you guys probably a year ago, and we were making a similar complaint about the lack of opposition to these kind of bad bills. And I threw in my input on why the Republicans weren't. Well, they're basically doing exactly what you said. Well, I got a phone call right after that from a Republican. I won't mention his name, but he said, "Hey, Ted, why are you beating up on the Republicans?" And and I said to him, "Why aren't you guys out on the media all the time, using the bully pulpit that you have as representatives or senators, and just hammering away at these bad bills?" And he said he thanked me for asking him that and telling him that. And after he hung up, he had 5 media hits the next day and a half. I think 3 on radio, 2 in print. And my point of that is that instead of just acceding to these horrible bills or trying to make them less bad, they should go out in full force in the media and educate the public about why they're so bad. And again, to differentiate themselves and to tell people the truth about what's in there. But instead, they keep passing these, they keep aiding in these bad bills, destroying their own brand, and being complicit in bad deals. They're just maybe slightly less bad, but they're still bad. And so, they have the bully pulpit. They're able to get in the media all the time. Why aren't they? Collectively, there's still a big group that can hit the media, but they don't.
It's to paraphrase Steve Martin talking to John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Here's an idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the voter. If there's an actual point to your existence as a Republican legislator in this state or Republican leader in this state. And right now, they are completely without a point. 11th hour, they rally for Invest in Kids, something they should have been doing for 5 months, and they should have been doing for the last 5 years, profiling the program, making it part of their brand. We're the school choice party. We're the empowerment party that's providing opportunity scholarships to lower income families, disproportionately minority. Here are the success stories. The obvious stuff. The obvious stuff, just as we're talking about. But there's just no talent, I guess, because it's not complicated. There's no willpower. There's no talent. There's no courage. I don't know what you decide what's lacking, but the work product is what it is.
Well, I think, I said this in a talk I did on Saturday, that you can't find a state in worse position than Illinois. I mean, you can find a competitor, maybe New Jersey or something, but you can't find one that's worse when you talk about property taxes, when you talk about home values, when you talk about homicide levels. We can just go on gas taxes. We can go on and on the negatives, right? So you would think that if there's one state in which you can mount opposition with facts, with data, and with a lot of damn logic and reason, it's Illinois. And yet we're the ones that have the weakest opposition to that stuff. So I think it's a fascinating problem. It's an amazing opportunity, but it's there to be grabbed. But we don't see anybody grabbing it yet.
Ted Dabrowski, President, wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Ted, thanks as always.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Ever notice how most people never leave online reviews unless they're really mad? And they want the entire world to know how bad their experience was. Rick from Forever Remodeling here, and we average 4.8 stars on 144 Google reviews. I know what you're thinking. Sure, 132